Today, we have a crazy revenge story about a sister ruining all of OP's stuff. We'll get into that in a bit, but first, stole a username preemptively. So, some context. This person financially freaked over all of my, at the time, our closest friends, and sent them and me into a horrid emotional spiral. Frankly, I want to do worse, but this was the easiest act of revenge I could think of that would have consequences for no one but him. Like a lot of people, he uses the same handle all across the web, so I notice he's not on Blue Sky, but I am, and I know how to get a disposable email, so I snatched that handle first, changed the display name to Get Freaked, his name, and made a single post saying, "Get freaked, idiot." Honestly, it does nothing, but it'll be good to know that if and when he decides to use that platform, he'll be greeted by that name being taken, and when he searches it, he'll see that. Delulu for Drama posted, "You handled that nicely." Also, hi, my name is Brendan, and if you guys enjoy these pro-revenge videos, it'd be awesome if you left a like or left a review if you're listening to our podcast. That said, our next story is, don't make fun of someone you're going to ask help for later. I don't know what she was thinking. Today at work, the microwave died, so I went quickly to the bar next to my work to get something to eat. I came back, ate, and forgot to take my wallet out of the kitchen. It wasn't until probably an hour after eating that a colleague, let's call her Stella, said with a smile on her lips if I had forgotten my wallet. That's when I remembered. I was already about to thank her for reminding me when she said that someone had thrown it in the garbage. I panicked. All my documents, tickets, and payment cards were there. As it turned out, it continued to lie on the table. All of it. No one steals at our place, so I wasn't afraid for the contents. I went back annoyed with it. She was still smiling as well as laughing. I didn't say anything. I hid the wallet in my purse and sat back down at the computer. I thought to myself, wait, you'll want something from me. You'll see. As it turned out, I did not have to wait long. A few minutes after her joke, she asked me if I would swap with her. She for the morning and I for the afternoon. I restrained myself not to laugh. I pretended to check the schedule carefully, reached for my phone and pretended to check something on it and on the schedule. After a while of this scene, I said that unfortunately I could not. I have a dental appointment that I can't reschedule. She sighed heavily and turned back to the computer, and all you had to do was not be a mean-spirited wimp. Joey_Bega Donuts 57 responded, "Be careful of the words you say to keep them soft and sweet. You never know, from day to day, which one you'll have to eat." Old Scottish saying that hung over my grandparents' kit table. Our next story is, Ruined Dumbledore's Death Plot Twist. My stepmother and I had a contentious relationship, truly living up to the fairy tale tropes. As an abused child who was terrified of retribution if I spoke or acted out of line, I always behaved as best I could, until The Half-Blood Prince was released. I'm an avid reader and can read a book faster than most I know. My husband calls it one of my autistic superpowers. I love the Harry Potter series, as does my stepmother. So teenage me took great delight in reading the book the same day it was released, then gleefully calling my stepmom to blurt out, "Dumbledore dies!" I let it sink in for a few minutes, then called back. When my biological father answers and tells me how upset she is, I tell him I need to apologize to her. He hands the phone over and I yell out, "And Snape is the one who killed him!" before hanging up again. That was literally the last time I spoke to her. I've since cut all ties with her and my biological father, but I still have a small amount of smug satisfaction in knowing that I ruined her day as my last-ditch, final, and only act of rebellion. Lil Jethro Bodline responded, "Freak, that second part was super devious. Well done. I actually have a similar story to yours. I was working at Sam's Club, Walmart's version of Costco, back in 2003-2004. I was reading Order of the Phoenix in the break room, and my friend who worked in the cash office, where we count our tills at the end of our shift and turn the money in, asked me how far I was. Told him I was like more than halfway, and he says, "Oh, okay, cool." At the end of my shift, I'm counting my money out, and he's behind the protective door that has the drop box for the money and like a slot where you can see his face, and he says, "Sirius Black dies." And I was just like, bro, what the freak? Anyway, I quit that job the next summer, but Half-Blood Prince comes out, and I read it in like a day and a half to exact my revenge. I called him up and got his voicemail. I play it cool and say, "Hey Jose, this is Jethro. Long time no talk, bro. Just want to see how you're doing and to let you know that Dumbledore dies in this new book. Have a good one." I got a text back a couple days later saying, "Dude, well played. Best revenge ever. Yours was even better though. Just slapped her down twice." Our next story is, downstairs neighbor threatens me, so I remind him it's not a good idea to pick a fight with someone who controls your ceiling space. So I'm on my balcony in an apartment doing a 10-minute craft project, and my downstairs neighbor storms out 2 minutes into some light hammering on my part at 6 p.m. to yell obscenities, threaten to beat my butt, and end with threatening to call the cops. I yelled back a few times I'd only be a minute, but she was just not reasoning with me. So when I wrapped up, I moved my subwoofer to the floor, adjusted some innocent settings, and played Corpse at a very reasonable volume. Whole floor is vibrating until quiet hours every day until I'm done laughing at my own joke. Tomorrow I'll be going to the office to turn them in for smoking on their porch and throwing cigarette butts where people, including me, walk their dogs. Poisoning hazard after all, and the smoke gets in my house. I haven't said anything because I'm not a narc, but don't start no thing, won't be no thing. Conspicuously Bland responded, "I'm still oblivious to how one can be a narc when you suffer from the consequences of their actions. Do you really want to wait until a dog gets sick? Or waiting until the secondhand smoke gives you a lung disease? How's complaining about that smoke being a narc?" Our next story is, a delight to watch. Not something I was directly involved in, but such a pleasure to watch today. Earlier, I was out with my wife getting the grocery shopping in our local supermarket. There was a young family with the mom looking quite frazzled getting their shopping in, and one of those couples pushing a trolley around. We live in an area where there are lots of folks working in finance, legal, and betting, and many couples fall into the dual income, no kids yet bracket. Lots of disposable income and an attitude to match. The supermarket has a bank of very expensive EV chargers, and they're always full. The dinky couple were doing a self-scan shop and had their shopping bags all ready in their trolley. Anyway, on to what happened. The frazzled mom was getting her shopping and her 2 kids were making a bit of a nuisance of themselves. Kids are kids and sometimes shopping is boring. They went running around the cheese aisle and bumped the dinky couple's trolley. The man said something to the older kid and then berated the frazzled mum, infant, of everyone before walking off. The mum told her kids off and they appeared to behave. I say appeared because as soon as the dinky couple had their backs turned, the older kid was slipping totally random things into their bags in their shopping trolley before dashing back to his mother. I passed the self-scan checkout to see the dinky couple had been picked out for a cash scan of their bags, and one of the items the kid had slipped in was one other item scanned. They were having to unpack everything onto a normal checkout to have everything scanned, and I heard him say, "I don't need corn plasters, and I certainly didn't put them into the bag. Must have been you." When you see kids less than 10 years old getting diamond quality petty revenge like this, you know the world is still a good place. Informal Cry 147 responded, "Would have been awesome if they slipped a pregnancy test in there and watched the man's face and world fall apart upon seeing it." Cat 121 replied, "I was shopping at Walmart with my grandma, both of us putting stuff into a shared cart, when some teenagers hid condoms among our purchases. Happened 38 years ago, and I still remember the feeling of, ah!" Our next story is Just Desserts. For over 20 years, I've hosted holidays at my place. My sister and her family moved out of state, but are close enough to come back for each holiday. Sounds great, right? Well, not so much. Sister and her family always go to her in-laws' place for the big meal. And since her mother-in-law is not a great cook, they just pick at the food, then invade my place for leftovers, aka the entire meal, afterwards. Now, you're probably thinking, what's the big deal, right? Well, the big deal is that it's gotten to the point my recipe for mashed potatoes starts with a 10-pound bag of potatoes. The turkey barely fits in the oven, the sides take up the entire counter, and I use an entire quart of cream just for desserts. It's a huge undertaking, and not only does sister not contribute financially, she never even has the decency to let me know whether they're coming or when. This year, I texted the family that my kids were going to make the meal for just us, and if anyone wanted to join us afterwards, I'd have dessert and only dessert to share. As usual, I got a text from everyone else, but nothing from sister. Rather than trying to chase her down, I assumed she had gotten the message and went on with my plans. The time comes and the kids put on a lovely meal. We eat and enjoy ourselves, then pack up the leftovers. A few families showed up over the next hour and we chatted happily. Then it happens. The cars pulling into the driveway. Sister's family has arrived. They invade in usual style, going around giving quick hugs before heading for the kitchen. It took less than 30 seconds before she's out, trying to be polite since there's still others there, to ask where the food is. Me. Aren't the pies on the counter? The bread pudding is in the crock pot and the sauce is on the stove. Her. Yes, but where's the food? At this point, the others are starting to catch on to what's up and trading glances. Me. I told everyone we were only doing dessert. Did you not get the message? Her. You know we can't actually eat at MIL's house. We were counting on eating here before we drive back. Me. Well, I think there should be fast food open somewhere between here and your place. Her adult kids were trickling out of the kitchen at this point, looking around as if a turkey dinner is going to magically appear out of thin air, and everyone else is practically holding their breath waiting to see what happens. She spewed some not nice comments about how they were probably not going to find anything open, and it was my fault they were going hungry. Told the kids to grab something to eat in the cars and stomped out. I don't know who lost their composure first, but I think it was my uncle who cracked and started laughing. Once we calmed back down, the rest of us had quite the nice evening enjoying just desserts. Own_breakfast_570 replied, It begs the question if your sister knew her mother-in-law's cooking was crappy and they don't eat the food there, why didn't she stay her butt at home and make her own food with her own family instead of being a mooch? Sounds like it might be time for everyone in the family to start putting the kibosh on her coming over for holidays and trying to score free food from you guys. Catless Boy Mom replied, But that would mean she would have to spend all that time shopping and prepping and cooking and dealing with the leftovers, as well as the expense. Yep, that's why I'm over it. Most of the family knew she's a bit spoiled, but I think it was pretty eye-opening for everyone who saw what happened. And dang if that wasn't the sweetest part of all. Our next story is, I got an obnoxious passenger fired. This is a long one, but it was the best revenge story of my life so far. I'm a South African living in Japan, and I took my Japanese wife to meet my parents and have a honeymoon in South Africa. One of the first 3 flights back to Japan was from Joburg to Qatar. We take our seats and get settled in. I noticed that a lot of the passengers around us were wearing the same t-shirts, some kind of pharmaceutical company. As soon as we got settled in, I noticed that the woman and 2 men sat behind us were also employees of this company. As soon as they got settled in, I noticed she, let's call her Brandy, was quite chatty, loud and a bit obnoxious. But I'm a nervous flyer, so at the time, I was more worried about the takeoff than her. So I put my earpods on and whoosh, we take off for our 8-hour flight to Qatar. As soon as the seatbelt sign switched off, Brandy started ordering brandy and cokes for herself and her 2 coworkers. As each drink came, Brandy's voice got louder and more obnoxious. After drink number 6, the topic of her conversation turns to relationships. By this time, half the cabin could hear their conversation and how she disapproves of interracial relationships. Even I could hear her through the guttural screams and face-melting guitar riffs of Meshuggah blasting through my earpods. Then it happened. A nice woman sitting on 4 seats to her left quite loudly says, "Ma'am, could you please quiet down? You're a bit loud and I'm trying to get some sleep." I heard it too, so paused the song and took out my left earpod to excitedly eavesdrop. Brandy was not happy. She says, "Excuse me, this isn't a nighttime flight. Haven't you heard of earplugs?" And then jumps straight back into her conversation. The tension in the air immediately changed. In that moment, all the people who heard the interaction caught eyes with each other, and we all knew this flight was about to get interesting. About 20 minutes later, a flight attendant comes and politely asks Brandy to quiet down a bit. She begrudgingly agrees, orders another round and quiets down, but it only takes Brandy about 30 minutes to get all the way back up to a volume louder than the jet engines roaring outside the windows. Then another Chinese woman from the other side of the cabin gets up and walks to where Brandy is sitting, and in her best attempt at English says, "Please be quiet, my child keeps waking up because of you." Brandy looks up and, crap you not, asks this woman in very mispronounced Chinese, "Can you speak Chinese?" I'm fluent in Chinese, so I could understand what she was trying to say, and just kept repeating it until the frustrated Chinese woman went back to her seat. By this time, both flight attendants for our cabin were very much aware of Brandy's sassy nature and decided to close the bar for the whole cabin, which ticked me off because I was hoping to enjoy a few more whiskeys before we landed. A few minutes later, I hear the sound of shuffling, then plastic, and then the faint sound of what sounds like the cap of a glass bottle being cracked open. Then the sound of liquid being poured into cups. Yep, Brandy had opened a bottle of duty-free brandy she bought at the airport. And once again, their conversation began to crescendo. Now, the whole time I had been spectating the Brandy situation. I wasn't really paying attention to my wife, who I assumed was sleeping next to me. I then saw my wife pull one of her earpods out, turn to try and get a look at Brandy through the crack in the seat, and then turn to look at me with a face I rarely see my wife make. It was a face of pure rage and frustration. I snapped. Now, usually I'm not the kind of person who likes to cause a scene, but I decided that I'm not going to let this jerk of a woman ruin my wife's flight. So, like a crazy person, I stood up and announced loud enough that the entire cabin turned to hear me. "Excuse me, everybody, can I please have all of your attention? By show of hands, who of you would like these people to shut the freak up?" About 30 passengers all around us raised their hands. I then turned to Brandy and just point and say, "Look, understand? Shut up." I sat back down to the sound of applause from all the passengers that were raising their hands. My wife was shocked that I did that, but I told her that I did that because I could see that Brandy was beginning to bother you too. She gave me a hug, and the flight attendant that saw what I did brought me a cup of Coke but slipped me 2 of those little bottles of whiskey. Thankfully, Brandy and the gang then passed out and were quiet for the rest of the flight, so my wife and I could relax. But Brandy wasn't finished, and now she had a new target. Me. On our descent, Brandy awakes and decides that she wants to play some cards on the entertainment screen attached to the back of my seat, trying her best to hit the buttons hard enough to make my seat move. I teach kids for a living, so I know that she's behaving like an angry toddler trying to get a rise out of me, so I ignore her. We land, the plane taxis off the runway, and everyone starts getting up to get off the plane. As soon as I get up and she sees my wife and I, she starts repeatedly insulting me about my weight and how I married an Asian woman because I can't get a real South African woman, blah blah blah. High school bully level bull's gut. I just smile and nod my head at everything she was saying and exit the plane. Finally, Brandy and her coworkers walk off, and my wife and I find a nice cafe to have a coffee and chill and stretch for a bit before we make our way to the next boarding gate for our second flight to Malaysia. We eventually get to the gate, and lo and behold, guess who's also flying to Malaysia? That's right, it's Brandy. She's standing by the gate window taking selfies and doesn't notice me. I find an empty seat next to a guy wearing the same pharmaceutical company t-shirt and say, "Excuse me, sir, that woman over there with blonde hair taking selfie, what's her name?" He asks me why, and I say that she looks like someone I used to go to high school with, but I wasn't sure and didn't want to make a butt of myself asking her directly. He tells me, and I say, "Oh, then it's not her, sorry." I thank him, and for the remainder of the wait at the gate, logged into the airport Wi-Fi, found their company's Facebook page and website, and sent a detailed recount of Brandy's behavior, being sure to include all the colorful things she was talking about with her coworkers. The next 2 flights back to Japan were uneventful and got home safe and sound. 2 weeks later, I get a reply from the CEO asking me for my number as he would like to talk to me about what happened. He calls me and profusely apologizes for what Brandy put us through. Turns out that by the time Brandy landed in Malaysia, the CEO had seen my message, changed her return flight back to South Africa for the very next day, and fired her at arrivals in JHB Airport when she got back. I bought a bottle of brandy and Coke on my way home from work that day to celebrate with my lovely wife. Forever Nola commented, "I've seen people on a plane applaud a couple times. One when some jerk got thrown off the plane before we ever got off the ground, and once after the pilot landed us safely after a particularly bad storm situation." Hari Tat Sat responded, "I was on a flight in the late 80s with expatriates returning home for Christmas. Most of the passengers applauded when the plane touched down on home ground. It was quite moving." Our next story is, I got an aggressive guy kicked out of the club. Just remembered this and thought to share it, and FYI, this story happened when I was around 18 or 19 years old. I lived in the UK, so drinking is legal at that age. My friends and I went to a club for some drinks one weekend. We were all having a good time and getting a bit tipsy. Well, as I went to get another drink from the bar, this guy barged into me with his shoulder. I could tell he was a bit drunk already and looking for trouble. I'm quite tall and fairly strong, so when he barged into me, I was unaffected. So he wanted to try again, but this is where he messed up. He took a step back, clenched his fists, lowered his body, and began to run towards me in an attempt to give himself enough momentum to make an impact. As he ran towards me, I pivoted my body 90 degrees and let all the force he accumulated be released into the air behind me. He then loses his footing and falls into a group of girls. This was not my intention. I was only trying to avoid him in the moment. It was at this moment I stepped behind a pillar and peeked from behind it to see what happened next. Well, after he crash-landed into them, chaos ensued. The girls started shouting at him and hitting him. The security guards appeared within 20 seconds to grab him and drag him away. All the while, he was looking around to try and find me, perhaps to put some kind of blame on me. Anyway, after that event, I went on my way to get my drink, then back to my friends with this story. Own_breakfast_570 replied, "Well, that guy sounds like a douche. I don't know why people think it's okay to put their hands on people like that. I'm glad you were able to sidestep that fool and make him hurt himself and get 86 out of that club. I got a personal rule of myself is I don't care if you're a man or a woman, you put your hands on me and it's on." ADD Devil replied, "Thanks. Luckily, I didn't have to fight him. Letting him embarrass himself was extremely satisfying though, and with minimal effort." Our next story is, met my ex at the mall. Okay, so here's the story. I was married to my husband until he decided to cheat on me. We split, leaving me with 2 young children to take care of, obviously not on the best terms with him. Met him with his girlfriend at the mall yesterday. He's extremely, petty. He spotted me and started telling his girl, "Oh, are you tired, baby? Let me carry you." She laughs and agrees. I follow them around the mall for an hour, and the satisfaction from seeing his struggling arms is just perfect. Kinda petty, but I stoop to his level. Golbez89 posted, "That's weird, but what's really weird is that you saw him at a mall." OPA73 replied, "A local mall in my area is packed with stores of people every day like it's 1985. Major retailers and all 5 big anchor stores are full. It helps that they added an outdoor area with 10 to 12 trendy restaurants and a modern theater." Our next story is, mouthy tradesman on my job. I owned a small construction company. We did interior improvements in buildings. About 20 years ago, we were doing a fairly large job and I had employed all of my usual subcontractors, such as drywall, electric, and HVAC. One day I was on the job in shabby work clothes. I decided to do some cleanup as the job was getting cluttered. An electrician, an employee of my subcontractor, was doing the same. He didn't know me from Adam. At some point, I was standing out back near a dumpster that belonged to another tenant. We're not allowed to use that one for obvious reasons. The electrician walked up and dumped some of his trash in that bin. I politely informed him that this was not ours to use. His response was, "Ain't life a bench?" And then he walked away. A minute or two later, he returned, dumping more trash in the bin. At that point, I told him, "This isn't ours to use, take it out." He looked at me with a moronic stare and said, "Who the F are you?" I smiled and politely informed him that I'm the effing general contractor, that's who I am, as he quickly retreated and started to apologize as he cleaned the trash out of the bin. For the rest of the job, it was like magnetic repulsion. He would be anywhere that I wasn't. A couple of weeks later, he sheepishly apologized to me, to which I replied that you never know who you're talking to, so don't take a dang attitude. The guy was a worthless jerk, sort of a social project by his boss. I changed electricians shortly after that. Kuda26 posted, "I call bullcrap. Everyone knows electricians never clean up." Source, I am an electrician. Fascalarctos Rabir replied, "You're generally right. This particular day his boss was there, up on the roof at the time. He was probably told to clean up by his boss." Our next story is, ruin all my stuff? Good luck finding yours. I'm a 19-year-old female and my sister is 16. Put simply, she's always been a thief. Amongst other things, she stole our mom's credit card last year and blew over $250 on clothes. My parents told they've just given up on trying to discipline her, because no matter how they punish her, she just doesn't listen. We've all learned over the years to keep anything special hidden so she won't nick it. Her favorite thing to steal is clothing, mainly from my mom and I, no matter how much we ask her not to. She's also horrible at taking care of her stuff, so by the time we notice something's missing, it's usually already torn or stained, or she's lost it. The two breaking points for me were, after struggling financially for a long time, I bought myself a few nice, good quality matching gym sets and some new jeans. These were not cheap. They were all gone the next day, and I only ever got one gym set back with stains all over it. I put some sunnies up for sale on Depop, and when someone bought them, I went to box them. Guess who had stolen and lost them? This morning I discovered she'd stolen my favorite denim jacket, and I just lost it. So when she went out this afternoon, I raided her closet. Expensive dresses, shoes, handbags, jewelry, everything. She quite literally has nothing left. I'm leaving to go to my boyfriend's house before she'll be home, and I'll be putting 2 massive duffel bags of her stupid expensive branded clothes in his wardrobe until I feel like she's been tortured enough. I thought about dumping it all in a public bin, but I don't have the guts. I doubt it'll teach her any lessons, but I feel great right now. Plus, now I have a bunch of really nice expensive clothes to wear when I'm at my boyfriend's. HotFox4151 responded, "Your parents should be dealing with her. Giving up because she doesn't listen is not parenting, it's enabling. Get a lock on your room/closet and keep the jets with you at all times." Tintin2VL97005 replied, "The worst part is her parents have given up, but won't let OP protect herself. I think OP should go one further and sell enough of 16-year-old females' clothes that she's compensated the most recent theft. Just like, oh, it happened again? I know how you'll pay me back, and I don't need your consent any more than you seem to need mine. Rinse, repeat. Sis doesn't need to learn a lesson, but OP needs to stop being harmed by it." With that being said, that's all the time we have for today. If you enjoyed today's video, drop a like and comment below, and if you want to check out our other videos, click the video on the right. With that being said, I'll see you all next time.